So now it looks like we are live. We should get started.
Great. So, what are we here to chat about?
So 6
Is there
months
anything
ago,
happening?
you were excited about ChatGPT. You were trying to get me excited. 3 months ago, I got very excited about ChatGPT and OpenAI and other things. And if we meet founders, we get this kind of hot and cold reaction. Some are very excited. Some call it hype. Um, Maybe we should start there on saying whatever is happening in the world of AI, is it hype, and how is it relevant from an early stage SaaS founders perspective, or any SaaS company perspective, because that is what you and I spend a lot of our time on.
Absolutely. Cool. So, what's, all of this stuff that's happening, Rajan, what do you think? Is it 6 months ago, like you said, you were not sure. You thought this might be another hype cycle. 3 months ago, you got excited. And of course, most of us must have seen the Gartner hype cycle and stuff like that. So, what's your take this time? Is it hype? Is it real? What do you think?
So there is a little bit of a background to why I was not very excited, let's say 6 months or even 9 months ago, right? And I've not been excited about AI for many, many years. My first stint in startup was that I actually built a computer vision startup. And this is in 2007, and I hand-coded a system using Swift vectors. Back then, anybody who would build AI, you'll have to design what are called as feature vectors, right? And then you would use that to actually build a system. And I was building something for 3D object recognition. I built the startup, and then there were a lot of contemporary startups at that particular point in time. There's a company called Nevin Vision. There was another company called Ria.com. The founder Manjal Shah had recruited a lot of my classmates, and I was trying to build this. At that particular point in time, pretty much everybody who built an AI or a computer vision startup, which was hot at that particular point in time, did not find a lot of market traction. So it was not just this one attempt that I was doing, but pretty much everybody who was building it. Nevin Vision had a different outcome. They were acquired by Google because they had the patent to the Swift vector, and
Got
that
it.
was the reason Google had acquired. And then practically for many years, I felt that the technology of AI, in terms
Mhm.
of the promise it had made, it never lived up to its potential. And when I studied computer vision and AI 20 years ago in college, at that particular point in time itself, it had already seen one or maybe even two winters. So AI always felt like this. Oh, this is fascinating. We've seen a lot of movies, and we've seen Terminator, and we've seen even the Steven Spielberg movie called AI, and a lot of these conversations about, oh, this
Right.
is fantastic, will it lead to consciousness, all these would come. But in terms of real impact on business, the promise was always ahead of reality. So I
Got it.
carried a little bit of that experience of saying, look, I mean, this is a great promise, but I'd like to see it turn into real business opportunity.
Right.
Where the things change for me is literally what had happened with ChatGPT. And ChatGPT or OpenAI also had started in 2016. If you watched that Sam Altman video, he'd say that in 2016 people thought he was very crazy. They are making statements that many people have made 20 years ago, and it is just not real, right? But then what is not questionable right now is that even if it was a toy, there are 100 million people who are using that particular toy,
Right.
and people are figuring out different use cases, and that 100 million people who are using it as a toy, and then there are people who are actually trying to build businesses around that. So this aspect of chat gpt having adoption with this many number of people, and that too that fast. And if you actually compare it with any other technology that has had adoption, starting from telephone to Facebook to even TikTok, which took about a year to get to 100 million users. This literally did it in 30, maybe 90 days in getting to 100 million users. So that is
Right.
where I am of the view that, look, it is no more something that is promising more than what it can actually deliver. In the last 6 months, in terms of adoption of this technology by the world, is real. And maybe we've reached that point in time where the technology has what you and I call about saying moved from a custom domain to a product domain, or maybe arguably a commodity. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But so that is where my view of of why I was not excited about it, and the background to that, and then the recent changes that we see. In fact, I would say in the last 6 years, in the last five months or 6 months, 5 to 6 years worth of progress has happened in terms of people that have adopted, in terms of the outcomes that people are seeing, in terms of the use cases that it can solve. But like any other technology, this will also go through a little bit of our overestimation and underestimation, but doesn't feel like hype at this point in time to me. What is your take, right? I know you
I
said.
think we should just hold on for one moment and confirm that we are actually live. I'm just checking to make sure that we are live because from the feed I couldn't figure out whether we are actually live.
It shows live to me on the video here, and it says
Okay,
that
cool.
we've been live here for a few minutes.
Okay. I think there's a difference probably in a couple of different fields. I'll just share that with Yusuf once. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think what you were saying about lots of things happening, 6 years of work happening in 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever. Time compression is very real, right? And I think for me, it kind of feels like the only comparable I have is the early days of COVID, right? So if I look at March 2020 or April 2020, like it wasn't even clear what was going on. Every day there would be like different information. When the first actual wave was picking up real numbers with the tests, maybe there was a second wave or something like that. Again, there was like a huge amount of fog of war in terms of what should you do, what should you not do, what's going to help, what's not going to help. So it kind of brings parallels back to me of what was happening then. So how does a founder deal with that kind of a fog of war? Like, do you just wait it out? Is it going to stop? Is it to go like COVID? Like the news started becoming the same after a while, right? So if you just stayed in your house until the news slowed down, you probably were better off than trying different things in some way, right? Should somebody do the same with ChatGPT or GPT or LLMs or AI?
So I would say a terrible comparison because it brings horrible memories. But one part that you are saying about the comparison is right. Is that we were dealing back then with an event where there was no parallel and nobody in the world was equipped to deal with like what was going on, and that is perhaps the thing that you're talking about. And with respect to like what is happening in the AI in the last 3 months, 6 months is again the entire world is dealing with a rapid adoption pace that this is historically never been experienced before, right? So what happens in places like this is that whatever you thought or whatever you knew before, they those type of mental models stop working for you. Like people use the word playbooks or people use the word experience. Like whatever the experience that you've had in the past, you just cannot rely on saying, hey, back then I had this problem or somebody that I knew had this problem and this is how they solved it and this is how I'm going to solve it, right? So that's where I think the comparison is a fair comparison. And at that particular point in time, from a mental model perspective, if they don't work, then you have to actually rely on first principles, right? You have to actually break it down to places like, okay, what is fundamentally happening? You have to go to the depth, and those are some of the things that will have to be done in this cases as well. And there are people like Elon Musk or other first principle thinkers will go ahead and then say, okay, so what? Like if this is happening, then so what? If this is changing, then so what? If that is happening, then so what, right? That type of framing or that type of question, some people are able to do, but other folks, I think will have to use some tools to help them think through that. So basically, you need different mental models and do some amount of first principle thinking. No playbooks will work, right? So that's how I would think about this. That's where the comparison is fair.
Got it. So, when you're talking about using different playbooks and using or discovering playbooks as well, right? What is something that comes to mind for you, or what tools do you use?
So the one that I have been having conversation with a lot of folks in the recent, I would say, many weeks, right? And anybody we are talking about AI, and immediately I go to Wardley Maps. Wardley Maps is something that you and I came across like 4 or 5 years ago, put out by Simon Wardley, where Simon Wardley was someone who was involved in making Ubuntu really, really successful, and he said most people actually use the word called strategy, but then they don't know what they are talking about. And if you want to do a strategy, or if you want to sort of make deliberate choices, then it is better for you to actually draw things down and visually say, hey, what is changes that are happening. So Wardley Map is one tool that I would say is kind of useful to actually have a conversation about like what is changing and what are the changes that you have to make. But I know that you are a bigger fan of Simon Wardley, so why don't you give a quick intro of what Wardley Map is and like how it can be used to actually make those deliberate choices?
Yeah, so I think the funny part is the two tools that I use a lot. One is a Fituation, one is Wardley Maps. Both of them, you introduced to me,
And you are a bigger
and
fan.
I'm a I'm an addict, right? And I think the third one, is Goal, Theory of Constraints by
Zero
Goldratt.
constraints. Yeah.
That one I was introduced to by a friend called Vinod in about 2007-8. But anyway, I think these tools work together brilliantly. For me, the key that Simon talks about from a Wardley map perspective is that it is a lot of times I think we are trying to play games where we don't know what is the shape of the playing field, right? And so I think a very simple analogy is, and which Simon uses all the time, is that, like, let's say you're playing chess and you're playing chess with someone else, and the person you're playing with, they can see the board, and you not only cannot see the board, but you don't even know that the board has 8 by 8 squares and how many pieces and where they are, right? So imagine trying to play chess with somebody who can actually see the chessboard, uh, play the chess pieces, but your only thing that you can do is you can call a piece and you can call a move, and then somebody might tell you that's okay or not okay, or that you're playing the game. And then you might imagine some moves and keep trying to get better at it, better at it, better at it. Are you able to win? Probably not, right? But in the world of business, I think we've been playing the game of business without even understanding what is the landscape, where am I playing, what are the rules, what is a good move, what is a bad move. We don't know any of these things, right? And we don't even think that we don't know these things. It's like in the land of the blind kind of a thing, right? And so the irony is that actually with AI and with all of these things, uh, human intelligence in terms of understanding where we are, where we want to go, what we can do, is going to become even more important. And so to me, bodily mapping is about placing the current state of the world, state of the ecosystem on a map, and trying to figure out, hey, where am I? Where is the rest of the world? Where is competition going to take us? How are these things evolving? And therefore, what is a good business opportunity to go after? Or which kind of a business opportunity requires what kind of a means to get where, right? I think that's something that Wardley Maps really helps me understand.
So for folks that are tuning in, they may, some of them have not heard about Wardley Maps, right? So you're talking about like you need a map, but if you were to give a quick intro so that people can catch up, then what would be like a quick intro of like what does the Wardley Map help you do? How does it help you like make
Sure. So I
choices?
think easiest way to do mapping is to actually look at a map, right? And let's see if I'm able to share my screen, and we can try to see if that works.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm using a tool called Visual Studio Code, and I'm using a plugin called the Body Map plugin. And so I'm just trying to make a sample map here. So Rajan, what do you want to map?
Let us say that there is a marketer and he needs to figure out, like in the age of AI, what
Okay.
are the things that will change for him.
Okay. So this is the marketer the customer, or the market is the user basically, right?
Marketer is the user, is the customer, correct?
Okay.
So you're building some Martech tool, Martech
I'm building a
SaaS.
Martech tool. The marketer is my customer, right? And I'm trying to figure out, hey, what am I supposed to do with this? How can I how can I help this marketer? Correct?
That's right.
Okay. So I'm gonna put the marketer here. See what's going on.
So, Prasanna, as you're going to bring that up, there is one thing that I want to sort of point out, and this is something that I'm seeing the last couple of weeks is that uh, folks are saying, hey, new APIs have come in, and there are new ways for us to build apps. And then there is this founder that I met, and he said, look, OpenAI is great. It has released its API. I'm going to go build an iOS app for it, right? And what happened is that, you build the iOS app, and then OpenAI, itself releases an iOS app. I mean, that should be like
Right.
obvious in retrospect. But what I've seen is this tendency of people saying, "Oh, I need to come up with a response, so let me go build something new." So a lot of people are
Yep.
holding themselves and saying that let me do hacks, or let me even there are folks that are running hackathon. But then when you
Yep.
go and build something in the history of hackathon, maybe there are one or two applications that I've seen actually that has turned into production, and
Yep.
Microsoft Teams is one, right? But otherwise, like a lot of the hackathons are all great interactions, and then are great ways for you to develop. But does it lead into like a product, and that product leads into a business is always like a big question mark.
Yeah.
So one
Absolutely.
thing that the listeners for the listeners I would say is that yes, you need to go ahead and do hack, but maybe before you do the hack, if you can do the map on coming up with the right app idea, right, on what is it that you should do, like what is it the customer wants, and what is it that the alternates in the ecosystems are going to evolve into, like therefore mapping becomes that much more important, right? So map before hack.
Yeah. So so what I'm going to plot here is basically looking at what are the things that a marketer needs, right? And so marketer is really looking for how do I generate leads, and uh, marketer for generating leads, they care about, let's say, a customer ICP, right? So I'll just say ICP, right? So to get leads, they need to understand the ICP very deeply. What else do they need to get leads, or what else
Prasanna, are
does the
you
marketer
sharing
care
your
about?
screen? Are you sharing a screen yet?
Yes,
Okay, maybe
I thought I
some reason
was.
I'm not seeing. Okay. Can somebody in the chat tell us if you are able to see the screen?
Let's assume for the moment.
Yes.
Okay,
No,
why not?
they're not. Yeah. So you wanna try that present again?
Yeah, we'll try it once. If it doesn't work, then we'll
We'll
start
have to talk through it. Yeah.
Okay, are you able to see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So what I've put here is a sample map. There's a marketer. There are leads. The marketer's primary goal is getting leads, and to get leads, they need to have understanding of an ICP. So what else? What are the other things that?
So they may actually run some campaigns. Somebody may actually do an outbound campaign. Somebody actually may
Sure.
do content writing. So I can think of two subdivisions. One is I need to write
Okay.
email sequences, outbound and email sequences, and then the other one is I need to set up my blog and my content up and running, content strategy up and running.
Got it. Okay. So I'm putting an outbound campaign here. I'm putting an inbound campaign here as things that they do, right? And I'm gonna put. What did you say? You said email.
Yeah, like generate cold out email sequences.
Email sequences. Okay. So we're going to be looking at so marketer wants leads. For leads,
Yeah.
they do either outbound campaigns or they do inbound campaigns. The outbound campaign consists of email sequences, and the inbound campaign. What did you say it has?
Content strategy.
A content strategy.
Right? And that content strategy is going to lead to writing content, right? And message mediums.
Okay, so the inbound campaign needs a content strategy. It also needs actual blog posts and so on. I'll just put it as content, right?
Yeah. One thing you also want to do is say that these leads are managed inside a CRM, right? So anybody who's like, let's say 5 or 10 people or above, they are going to use a CRM to manage these leads.
Got it. So CRM required. The leads will sit in a CRM essentially.
Yeah, sit in a CRM like HubSpot.
Cool. So we'll just stick with this for the moment and just try to explain, with this, uh, if you can see what AI can do or not, or whatever. But essentially, if you think about this email sequences as well, right? You will need a outbound strategy, and you will need out email sequences. Both the outbound strategy and the content strategy will depend on understanding of the ICP,
Mm-hmm.
right? And both the email sequences and content, both of these will depend on. So, for example, the inbound campaign may actually work through the through HubSpot,
Hmm.
right? So both these, like if there's a CRM and the leads, let's say you're using HubSpot for email as well, right? All of these will depend on the CRM as a tool.
Prasanna, can you walk through as to why did you put this on the extreme right?
Sure. We'll come to that, right? Okay, cool. So, now when we look at this map, what is essentially happening is I'm going to walk you through from the top, and then we'll think about the left and the right. The top to bottom, the marketer is looking for leads. For leads, they need an inbound campaign and an outbound campaign. They also need the inbound campaign needs content. The leads have to be somewhere, so you're putting them in a CRM. We're assuming it's something like HubSpot. The outbound campaign needs an outbound strategy, and let's say this outbound strategy involves email sequences, and therefore the email sequences and the outbound strategy together are something that the outbound campaign needs. The inbound campaign needs a content strategy and content, and that's where uh, these things are, right? Now, if you look at this, what both the outbound strategy and the inbound content strategy, both of them need you to be able to understand the ICP. And what am I putting on the left? What am I putting on the right? Is essentially something on the left is more magic, something on the right is more of a commodity or a utility, right? So when I put a CRM that's somewhere here, what I mean by that is that the CRM itself is today a product and it's almost a utility. Most CRMs are similar. Most can do the same. The utility part of what the CRM does across different CRMs is the same, and therefore nobody will build a CRM them for themselves, right? Versus if you look at an outbound strategy or an content strategy, these are custom to you, and you will build these strategies yourself in some way, shape, or form, right? And if you look at the strategy versus what's happening in terms of the uh, actual execution of these pieces, what you'll realize is that today, if you have a good outbound strategy, you can actually outsource your email sequence creation if you're in a commodity kind of a market, and if you're looking to try hard. And the content also you can outsource if your content strategy is very strong. So in that perspective, things on the right side, that is towards the commodity and product, are more available on off the shelf than things on the left side, which is something that you need to do by yourself, right? So understanding the ICP in that sense is close to being magic, because those founders who are able to understand ICP, the ideal customer persona, and create an outbound strategy and a content strategy based on the persona, will perform far, far better than somebody who doesn't understand the ICP. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So how do we look at you know the role of AI in this, Rajan?
So See, from a Wardley map perspective, right? So what you did is, you said here is a persona, and just to sort of just again to recap for people that are listening in, right? So map is a saying, look, here is, uh, draw a visual representation by keeping your customer in the center of that, and then say what are the jobs that he's trying to do, and each of the jobs that he's trying to do, it has multiple components underneath it, and then break it down. So the job that he's trying to do is manage leads, and then to do that he has to do an outbound approach and an inbound approach, and to do the inbound approach he needs to do content, right? So these are the components for this. And then the other thing that the Wardley map is trying to like paint here is saying that these things don't remain static, they change, right? They change based on the persona that you're taking up. They change based on the industry that you're working in. The marketing guy in a university context will be very different from a marketing guy who's working in real estate or who's working in a technology company. So for them, these are things that are going to be different. Now the most important thing for you to actually say from a strategy perspective, or like the deliberate choice that you're making is to understand, ask, saying that are the jobs, the fundamental jobs that you're doing, are they changing? And then the components that these jobs to be done depend on, are they changing or not? So if you look at this particular map, if somebody is driving an inbound strategy and that depends on content, that content, earlier there was an approach which is a strategy, and then, like, once you have identified the strategy, you have to actually repeat it. So now, what has happened with something like a OpenAI or a Chat GPT based interfaces is that your ability to create a lot of content is like, once you know how exactly to create, like, how, what kind of headlines you will write, how you'll write the last 100 words, like how will you create the hooks, how will you create the subheadings. Once that process is figured out for you, generating a lot of that is not going to take weeks. It will only take half an hour for you now. So you were actually custom building it, even though you understood your ICP for your industry, but that content which took about a week is only going to take 30 minutes. So in that way, the evolution of this subcomponent has gone from that something that you will create as custom is now moved to a place where it is commodity. Earlier, when you were like building this for a marketer, you were building tools for him to actually manage this that will take him a week to produce this. Now the tools that he has access to, right, if he were to plug himself into Chat GPT, then he can literally generate in 30 minutes. So that content creation has actually moved from commodity place, from custom to commodity. Now when
Right.
that happens, and like, when the alternates also come in, when everybody can do that, then when you are solving this problem for this marketer, where does the value shift? What is it that you should make as a choice? Now, should you build editors and tools and like helping you actually, like, edit the content better, or should you focus on other aspect of value that can be delivered to the customer? So that becomes the question that we have to ask. So when AI comes in, in the context of map, you have to ask this question, saying what is evolving, right? And what has happened is it has taken 20 years, maybe 40 years, maybe even 60 years for some of this expectation around saying, hey, I will ask a system to write a piece of content for me and it will generate something which will look very legible, right? That has happened in a span of, like, 40 years. But it turns out that in the last 6 months it has happened really, really fast, right? Earlier also, a lot of people wanted to build systems like this. They were not successful, but now ChatGPT has shown that, you can do this. So it has moved from custom to commodity. Now that when custom to commodity happens, then what customer places value on, that changes. So therefore, what would you do will change. So the question then, somebody should be asking is saying, okay, I have to assume that this is available as commodity. Then maybe it is much easier for me to plug in as an API to this, and not really invest my own time, effort, and technology in solving that particular piece, and not even sort
Yep.
of build a lot of tools around it. I need to move to a different value layer where I can offer more value to the customer. So this will be one obvious choice that you will make when you are able to see it like this.
Yeah. So I'm just placing the evolution of the human intelligence, right? And human intelligence is evolving into, LLM intelligence or whatever you might call it. We're somewhere here. Essentially, when human intelligence evolves and becomes stronger, then what you're saying is that content strategy, what was custom, right, now becomes more of a product.
Right. Arguably commodity, right?
Yeah. So we could discuss. I mean, we could say, hey, is content strategy now a product or a commodity? But either way, what people have to understand is that when I had to use human intelligence, which was very custom thing, very different. The failure rate is very high. The failure rate is basically 80% of the time the human strategy fails. The human intelligence fails different ways. Versus if you're able to move it into a non-human intelligence and LLM intelligence, then if you're doing content strategy, the repeatability of that content strategy may become far, far higher, right? Because in a product context, your failure rate for anything that you do in a product context is 1%, right? So when we look in the Wardley map, the left side, the Genesis side, the failure rate is almost 99%. So you 90%. So you try something 90% of the time, 99% of the time it might fail. In the custom phase, the 80% of the time it might fail, and only 20% it might work, or 40% it might fail, and only 60% it might work. But when you come to product, you expect products to work 99.99% of the time, right? So what happens in this shift, if you are able to improve how you are doing your content strategy by using LLMs, even I, as somebody who is not a good marketer, doesn't know how to build a content strategy. So my content strategies would have failed 90% of the time. With LLMs, if I'm able to build a content strategy and vet it, and of course I have to check and so on and so forth, but a content strategy that I generate may now be above average, right? And it might work more than 50% of the time, and that's a huge shift.
Right. And just to build on that particular point, right? Why this change has to be thought through. Simon actually gives a great example in, in his own writings. If you look at like 15 years ago, there were a lot of operating system variants for Linux, right? There was SUSE Linux, there was Red Hat, and there was Ubuntu, and like a lot of people were actually focusing on just coming up with, okay, I'm going to build a different variant of open source on this, right? But eventually, if you see in that open source distribution, two companies really won. One was Red Hat and another one was Ubuntu. And Simon credits, thinking through like this as the key reason for Ubuntu to win, because what he saw was like Ubuntu, if you remember, was actually distributed through CDs. You could actually send an email to some place, and doesn't matter where you are in the world, they'll ship you a CD, right? They thought they'll win the distribution like that. But then when Simon Wardley looked at like the shifts that are happening in the industry through cloud,
Right.
through virtual machine, what he realized is that the adoption of an open source distribution like Red Hat or others were far higher in enterprise, and there in the enterprise also virtual private servers were coming up. And he said that if I can come up with a distribution that is the most easiest, not for end users, but for anybody who's spinning up a VPS, right? And there, all the dependencies are all taken care, and he can just, in a very quick way, he's able to spin up a VPS where the Linux version is working really, really well. Then people will naturally gravitate towards it. And he says that that one particular change, as he realized that things were shifting in the market, right? And he made his change to where the puck is moving, where the market is shifting towards to, and that led him to turn the Ubuntu market penetration from 3% to, I think, a very 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 high percentage, right? So this word about strategy or the deliberate choice that you are making, when especially when the external environment is changing, the key question to be asking is what is changing, right? You might be working on something, you might be building a product for a marketer, and you may have built a lot of features that is very relevant for him. But when the external environment changes, right, when a lot of things are changing, when like a lot of components within the tech stack that you're building is changing, that means that it leads to change in behavior of the people. And when behavior of people change, then you need to sort of adopt to how people are behaving. And when you make that change, this is what will help you be successful, and not really sort of saying that I'm also going to go do another open source project, or I'm going to go douse a couple of $1 million in like saying that I also have another variant. Prasanna, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that behavior change. Right? When this behavior change happens, when you go from custom to product, right? Um, one is that you need to think about different level and layer, but then how to address the behavior change, like how to uh, work across when people are. I mean, in the Ubuntu case, it was about system admins, right?
Yeah.
How would you actually manage this?
Yeah. So, if you had asked me in 2008 that, there's a paradigm shift happening from actual physical servers to virtual machines, and you asked me who would be administering the virtual machines, I would have told you, hey, the system admins will grow up and learn this new skill, and they will be administering the virtual machines because system admins keep learning new stuff, right? So it's not that system administration was a skill that was cast in stone, but system admins had to keep on learning stuff. So they will just learn the new things about VMs and become people who run VMs. But ironically, when the characteristics of servers and the characteristics of VMs, they were so different that when compute went from a custom slash product, which is server, to a product slash utility, which is a VM, system admins actually didn't make that shift. Most system admins stayed in the old paradigm because they made so much investment in that learning that they didn't want to give up that learning. Instead, what happened was a new category of people picked up these new behaviors and these new, uh, uh, you know, uh, performance characteristics and new behavior characteristics of these VMs, and created an entirely new line of thinking, which is basically DevOps, right? And so 10 years ago or 12 years ago, when DevOps started, people didn't even know what to call it. It's called all kinds of things. And then slowly the name came, and then it got standardized, and now to some degree DevOps is standardized, right? So today, if you think about something like strategy, going from something that's a custom strategy to becoming a product or a commodity, because the intelligence underneath is becoming more standardized. uh, what I would think is that what anybody might think is that the current marketing agencies will be the ones that will adopt this and win, right? But in reality, the current marketing agencies may start pushing, saying, "Hey, we are a human-created strategy, which is more superior, and therefore, you should buy a human-created strategy." And they may start positioning themselves as human-created strategy, which is more exclusive, and so on and so forth. They might go in that direction, and the people who win may actually not be the agencies of today, right? And the same way, from a tool perspective, some of the folks who have built tools today to solve a certain problem at a certain level may not be the same people who adopt uh, LLMs or AI and stuff like that and bring new capabilities for their customers, because their customers may not buy that change in behavior, right? The old school companies didn't all adopt VMs and cloud and DevOps and move. The old school companies maybe still have stayed on mainframe. It's a lot of folks who are startups and stuff like that who've used the new tools because the behavior had to change, right? So Netflix was able to make the transition, Blockbuster did not, and so there are many folks like that who may win in this evolution as well.
Right. I'm gonna talk a slightly different question, but before I go there, on this, in terms of the change, who all does it impact? See, for us, for you and I, early stages is companies which are at about $1 million and lesser, right? I mean, in terms of the revenue. But when this change happens, who all does it impact?
Yeah, so I think there are two things that are very different from most previous uh, previous technological changes, right? Maybe with the exception of, I mean, similar to some degree as electricity and computing as well. But the changes in computing happened over a very long period of time. The changes in electricity happened over a very, very long period of time, right? Number one, this intelligence that's being made available is now available on tap as a utility practically to anybody, right? How good is it? How bad? How not good is it? Matter of discussion. But just as a data point, GPT 3.5, which is now whatever 9 months old or whatever, hallucinated uh, the hallucination of GPT 3.5 versus hallucination of GPT 4. GPT 4 is now hallucinating 90% less on the same kind of a test, right? So that evolution and the availability is very, very fast, right? So if you look at earlier stages of how a lot of these things evolved, they would go through a phase where they were magic. Then it would take 20 years for them to become something that is custom, or maybe thousands of years, but 20 years, 30 years to become custom, right? And then they would become product, and then it would take another 20, 30 years for it to become a utility, right? If you look at compute started in the 1960s. So literally it took 50 years for it to become a commodity, right? Versus with GPT, it has gone from being magic like 5 years ago, or say 2012 when first large LLMs were doing image detection. In 10 years, it has become a utility where 100 million people are using it. That is insane, right? And with 100 million people using it, you no longer can call it magic, right? It's literally something that people are using daily. I use it like 3.5 times today. Right? So that is going to change. What to me, what it means when 100 million people use it is that it's going to be used by everybody, practically speaking, right? So it's going to make changes in a lot of different things that all of us use, irrespective of what kind of work we do. And so all the software that we use today, we use it in a very there's only human intelligence in that. Maybe there's spell check, maybe there's a few things, right? But each of those pieces of software, if it's augmented by machine intelligence, then it's going to make me much more powerful, right? And so imagine any software that I use being powered by more than my intelligence. My intelligence is not a lot, uh, but powered by substantially more than my intelligence across all the domains of human intelligence. And that is going to change almost every surface of software that we touch and engage with over the next 24 months.
So I was talking to a serial founder who's built his second SaaS startup, took it to 50 million and got it acquired, and he's still running it as an independent company. And then I spoken to about a couple of other who are at 10 million and above. One thing that I heard common from all of them is saying that if you are less than 10 million ARR, see, usually what happens is when platform shift happens, all big companies, small companies are figuring out what to do. And if it is a big company, you create what is called as a skunks team. 3 to 5 people go figure out, like, we will give you space to experiment, and then you're not connected to the mothership. You'll go and explore, and this will be like a SWAT team which will have all the resources that they need. They'll go and figure out what should be the strategy for the company to move forward, right? But what these folks told me is that, look, if you are less than 10 million, your entire organization has to be that skunks team, right? Yeah, a large company which is 50 million and above, right, they can create a separate skunks team and then say, hey, figure out, like, when these changes are happening, and these changes are happening so rapidly, how is it that we need to build something, how is it that we need to change something? But anybody who's less than 10 mil, right, you have to
Right.
actually reimagine completely as an entire skunks team. And that to me was a little scary, right? He was saying that, look, it takes, how long do you think it takes to get to 10 million, right? Maybe 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years. But if you're a startup and you have spent the last 5 or 7 years in getting to 10 million, now you have to again face a stage where you have to say, okay, looks like I'm at ground zero, and how do I look at, offering a solution to the target segment that I'm going after, by reimagining, saying, how will AI come into as a mainstay of the solution that I'm proposing. So anybody that who's less than 1 and anybody who's less than 10, they are at a similar situation in terms of, how they have to think about building this solution. So that part was scary for me, right? Saying, oh, you
Absolutely.
know what, even at 10 million, you spend the 5-7 years, you still are facing an existential or like a disruptive threat. And what like this founder also said is that, from an Indian perspective, we've always been good at execution. Like, very less
Right.
have we faced very technology led disruption, right? So we built Flipkart, which was like, a better version of Walmart, or like, a better version of Amazon. Or we built Ola, which is like a better version of, or the India version of Uber. And we built some B2B SaaS company. It was a better version of already a company that had built 50 100 million in revenue in US. But now when the technology disruption is coming, it affects them, but it also affects the Indian B2B companies which are looking at it from a global perspective.
Yeah.
So what is one
So
thing that doesn't change,
so
right?
to me,
All these changes is great.
yeah. So I think what doesn't change, right, is if you looked at the Wardley map, I think the understanding the customers continues to remain challenging, uh, because customers' needs keep changing and evolving. So customer that you got a while ago, in their needs don't stay the same, and so they are adopting tech. Their competitors are adopting tech. Their environment is changing. All of that stuff is changing. So the customers' needs keep changing. Maybe the customers' needs will change faster than before. So the need to understand a customer's problems and values and what they want to do and what do they want to get done and how do they want to get it done, that stuff does not change, right? And so I'm hoping that as entrepreneurs, as meat intelligences that are we are getting threatened by machine intelligences, that understanding people and understanding what their needs are and understanding what they will do and what they will want to do, I'm hoping that that is something that as a need will not change.
Yeah, there is a quote from Warren Buffett or some famous investor. It's like, the trends keep happening. I mean, humans are cyclical, right? I mean, in terms of like, there are changes that will happen, but in terms of how the emotional responses, what do we care about? We still care about prestige. We care about status. We care about happiness. We care about good looks. Right? We care about promotion. So those kind of things are not going to change in a B2B
Yep.
environment or in a in a consumer environment. How we deliver that, how it is solved, those parts may actually change. But if you go back and understand that ICP that you drew in the Wardley map, where you said like we need to understand that ICP is not going to go away from custom to commodity, right? The
Yep.
understanding of that ICP, you will have to
Correct.
go and understand that particular ICP. In fact, from a SaaS perspective, one of the most important core competency for any founder is their in-depth understanding of how that particular ICP does their buying process, right? Whether they are buying software for a CRM, or they're buying a software for professional productivity use case. Are they going to use a credit card? Are they going to ask a friend? Are they going to go look up on a forum? Are they going to read G2 Crowd
Correct.
reviews? Are they going to believe a testimonial? Are they going to ask for a discount? All this understanding of a customer on how they are making their buying process, and that particular part, if you understand that, then it could be AI or it could be any other platform shift that is happening. You can solve that particular need for the ICP or the customer much better than others can do.
Absolutely. I think we're over time for today. Uh, I'll just share one thing that I think is very different this time than previous things. I think this is something that you had brought up in the previous talk as well, right? I think the pace at which the incumbents are adopting AI is much higher than what startups can do with AI this time. And I think the example of Adobe rolling out AI, generative AI across all, the Photoshop product, which will now, AI is going to get used by basically every Photoshop user in the world tomorrow, right, or day after,
That's
because
true.
they've already moved to a SaaS model. They're already on the monthly, the online plan. Is breathtaking, right? It's mind blowing. So that I think is something that I have not seen where large enterprises generally have to be dragged, kicking and screaming to use new tech in many cases, especially in their core products. They'll use it in some third tier product, but they will not put it into their main product. Like Adobe didn't adopt SaaS for their main product until 10-15 years after SaaS became a big
Correct.
thing. But AI, they like used it literally 6 months after GPT-3 or whatever showed remarkable progress. So that to me is like just completely mind blowing.
Correct. One last actionable tip that you would give a founder to deal with the topic that we are discussing. What should they do after this?
Right. I think the common feeling might be, hey, let me go build something on AI that I haven't done before, or let me see what AI can do and stuff like that. I think that's definitely something that you should do. But I think that a lot of people are building the same tools over and over again, and they're going to get steamrolled by a Microsoft or an Adobe or Amazon or whoever else. Versus, I would look at uh, deeply understanding your customers' problems and seeing where a judicious use of current capabilities of LLMs or the diffusions set of products for images and so on can actually help your customers in a meaningful way to get their job done better, right? So that's what I would think about doing if you do.
Right. So my one very small delta add on that would be uh, that pick niches where others are not going to find it interesting, like to actually come and play. And in that place, if you can go and solve a small problem and then eventually grow from there, then it'll give you the time to actually catch up with like where Adobe Photoshop doesn't want to actually build a product. If you go and build a small niche product there and then solve it, then you won't have the competition from them. And then by the time they think that this is a big market, you would have actually gotten good amount of adoption to then deal with the competitor when they come back. All right, great chatting, Prasanna. We will continue to have more conversation on this if there is more interest. And
Absolutely.
let's sign off for now.
All right, bye, folks.
All
See
right,
you.
bye bye, folks.
If you have any questions, post it on the LinkedIn, and we'll answer that in the next session.